Episode 1. The motel room that checks you in. They say there are roads you shouldn't take after sunset, but that night, Mark Taylor didn't have a choice. He'd been driving his beat-up Ford across the Arizona desert for hours, running from debts, from his ex-wife, maybe from himself. The radio hissed with static. The gas gauge was nearly empty, and his phone had been flashing "no service" since dusk. The dry wind whispered across the asphalt. Sometimes the pebbles hitting under the car sounded like knocking. When the clock hit 11:47 p.m., he saw it, a flickering sign in the distance. Sandstone Motel, vacancy. He sighed in relief and pulled into the empty parking lot. The place looked dead. One long row of single-story rooms, yellow paint peeling, neon buzzing red across cracked pavement. Inside the front office, an old man stood behind a glass window, smiling just a little too long. "Welcome," the man said. "Room 9's open. You want it?" His voice dragged, warm but hollow, as if he'd said that same sentence 1,000 times before. Mark slid some crumpled bills across the counter and signed the ledger. When he glanced down, his breath caught. Every signature above his was the same name, his name. The old man handed him a metal key, cold, heavier than it should have been. "If you hear knocking in the night," he said quietly, "don't open the door. It's just the wind." Room 9 was at the end of the row. The door creaked open to the smell of damp carpet and rust. The walls were blistered, the TV unplugged, the air heavy. But Mark was too tired to care. He kicked off his shoes and collapsed on the bed. Around 2 a.m. there came a knock. 3 soft taps. He sat up, heart hammering. Nothing followed. "Just the wind," he whispered. Then it came again. 3 louder knocks. He crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. He turned away. Another knock, this time from inside the bathroom. A chill swept through him. He gripped the doorknob, breath shallow. From the other side came a rasping voice, low, familiar. "I told you not to open it." It was his own voice. He yanked the door open. The bathroom was dark, the mirror fogged, the faucet dripping. As he stepped closer, the light flickered, and in the mirror his reflection didn't move. Instead, it smiled, slowly. Then it spoke. "Welcome back, Mark. You came earlier this time." He stumbled back. The mirror cracked, fine spiderweb lines across the glass. Through the fractures he saw another room, the same layout, the same bed, but warmer, yellower. And in that room stood another Mark, smiling from the other side. The reflection lifted its hand to the mirror. Without thinking, Mark raised his own. The glass was ice cold. Then a hand, his hand, reached out from the mirror and grabbed his wrist, pulling him forward. He screamed. The world folded inward, and everything went black. The next morning, a trucker called the police about an abandoned car on the highway. Door open, keys still inside. Officers arrived at the Sandstone Motel. No one at the front desk, no guests. No sign of Mark Taylor. Later that day, the old clerk returned. He smiled faintly as if nothing had happened. "Room 9's empty again," he murmured, and wrote in the ledger, "Mark Taylor, checked in." 3 weeks later, a traveler stopped by looking for a cheap room. The old man said, "Room 9's open. You want it?" The traveler nodded and signed the book. His hand trembled. Above his name, written over and over again, was one phrase, same handwriting, same ink, Mark Taylor. If you ever drive the old Arizona highway at night, you might still see that sign flickering in the dark. Sandstone Motel, vacancy. And if you stop, just make sure you're the one checking in. not the one waiting inside. Episode 2: The Last Passenger of Route 86. Every city has its own ghost. Some live in old houses, some ride the bus. Samantha Cole had been driving the night route of the Denver transit system for almost 7 years. Route 86, her route, cut through the outskirts of the city, a long, lonely stretch of road surrounded by warehouses and empty lots. Most nights were quiet. A few drunks, a nurse coming home from a late shift, maybe a student too tired to care where the bus was headed. But there was always one constant passenger. Every night at exactly 12:17 a.m., at the stop under the flickering streetlight near the old train yard, he would board. Tall, wearing a gray coat, scarf too tight around his neck. He never spoke, never looked up. Always sat in the same seat, second row from the back, window side. He never pressed the stop button. He never moved. And every night at the last stop, when she turned around to say, "End of the line," the seat was empty. She told herself it was fine. Some people just didn't like to talk. But after a few weeks, she started noticing something strange. He didn't show up in the rearview mirror. The bus's interior cameras caught every seat, every angle, except his. Where he sat, the screen just shimmered, static, crawling across the pixels. And when she replayed the tapes, the timestamp always froze at 12:17:03, the moment he boarded. One night, curiosity won. When the man stepped on board, she glanced at his hand as he dropped the fare. The coins looked old, faded, with an eagle emblem she didn't recognize. She almost asked about it, but his eyes met hers, and she froze. They were gray, like storm clouds, no whites, no pupils, just gray. Then he looked away and walked down the aisle. That was the night she decided she'd find out who he was. At the end of her shift, she checked the fare box. Among the handful of coins and passes, she found one item that didn't belong. A paper ticket, yellowed and soft, stamped with black ink. Route 86, valid until November 3rd, 2008. It was 2024. Her breath caught. The date, it was 16 years ago. That was the same week the papers had reported a fatal bus crash on Route 86. The bus had gone off the road near the train yard. Everyone had died, including the driver. A woman named Samantha Cole. She laughed nervously. Maybe it was a coincidence, another Samantha Cole somewhere. She kept telling herself that, even as the chill ran down her back. But when she looked at the security footage again that night, something new appeared. For the first time, the static cleared, and on the screen, she saw the gray-coated man, sitting quietly, staring out the window. Then he turned toward the camera, slowly, deliberately, and smiled. That smile didn't fade, not when the lights flickered, not when the image glitched. He just stared, eyes wide, lips stretched. Then, in the last frame before the feed cut to black, he raised one hand and pointed, right at her, right through the camera. The timestamp at the bottom read 12:17:03. The next morning, the bus company found her route sheet still on the dashboard, engine running, headlights on, the driver's seat empty. Now, every new driver on Route 86 gets the same warning. If you see someone waiting alone under that flickering streetlight near the train yard, don't stop. Don't pick him up. Because if you do, the next time the bus rolls into the depot, you'll be the one sitting in the second row from the back, window side, watching yourself drive away. Episode 3: The Mirror in Apartment 214. You can live your whole life surrounded by mirrors and never realize which side you're really on. Ethan Moore was 23 when he moved into apartment 214, a cheap one-bedroom near the university, the kind of place that smelled faintly of dust and loneliness. He didn't mind. After a breakup and a semester full of failures, a quiet corner to start over sounded like salvation. The landlord was a quiet woman with a limp and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. As she handed him the keys, she said, almost like an afterthought, "Don't cover the mirror in the bathroom. The last tenant tried that, and it didn't go well." Ethan chuckled awkwardly. Sure, no problem." But when he saw it, the mirror, he understood what she meant. It was old. Too old. Oval-shaped, framed in tarnished brass, carved with strange swirling symbols that looked half like vines, half like letters. The glass itself wasn't perfectly smooth. When he moved, the reflection seemed to lag behind, just a fraction of a second. The first few days were normal enough. He studied, ate ramen, ignored the flickering hallway lights. But every night when he brushed his teeth, he noticed it again. His reflection would blink a little too late. Sometimes it didn't blink at all. He told himself it was exhaustion, bad lighting, maybe even stress, until one night when the reflection smiled first. He hadn't smiled. He was just staring at himself. But the thing in the mirror tilted its head slightly, lips curling upward. He dropped his toothbrush. The reflection didn't. From that night on, things started to change. When he entered the bathroom, he could feel the air shift, colder, heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. And sometimes when he turned off the lights, he could still see a faint silhouette standing in the mirror's surface, waiting. He tried to ignore it. He tried not to look. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like someone speaking from another room, then clearer, his own voice, echoing from behind the glass. "Ethan, why do you keep ignoring me?" He froze. The air in the bathroom grew still, like time itself had stopped. "You've been on the wrong side for too long," the voice continued. "It's my turn now." He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and shone it on the mirror. The reflection smiled again. But this time, the light didn't reflect properly. It just absorbed. The mirror seemed to breathe. And then, the power went out. In total darkness, the whisper became a hiss. Something scraped against the other side of the glass, slow, deliberate. He felt warmth on his face, like someone breathing inches away. He ran. The next morning, the landlord found the bathroom door locked from the inside. No response. She called maintenance to break it open. The mirror was shattered across the floor, but the surface beneath wasn't drywall. It was another mirror, perfectly smooth, reflecting a different version of the room. Episode 4. The Collector of Forgotten Voices. They say voices never really disappear. They just wait for someone willing to listen. Claire Matthews was a freelance journalist known for covering disappearances and unsolved mysteries across the Midwest. She didn't believe in ghosts or curses or anything supernatural. Not until she received a package with no return address. Inside was an old tape recorder and a note that simply read, "Listen to them. They miss you." The recorder was ancient, a reel-to-reel model with a scratched aluminum case and the words, "Property of J.R. Elridge, 1964, etched on the side. When she pressed play, static filled the air, followed by a man's shaky, whispering voice. "My name is Elridge. I record the voices of those who've been forgotten, the ones no one listens to anymore." Then came a chaos of overlapping whispers, male, female, even children's voices, all murmuring fragments of words. One cried, another laughed, and one soft, trembling voice just kept repeating, "I'm still here. I'm still here." Claire shut the recorder off, but even after it stopped spinning, the whispers continued, faint, like they were seeping from the air itself. That night, she dreamed. She stood in a dark, windowless room. Hundreds of tape recorders lined the walls, each with a glowing red light, each playing a different whisper, a symphony of lost souls murmuring in the dark. In the center of the room stood a man in a black coat, bent over one of the machines, replacing a tape. When she called out to him, he turned around, and there was no mouth on his face. Where his mouth should have been was a cassette slot. The next day, Claire began to investigate. She found old public records. J.R. Elridge, an audio engineer at a local radio station in the 1960s. After losing his wife and daughter in a car accident, he became obsessed with the idea that voices could hold a person's soul. He spent years collecting vocal imprints of the dead, convinced that if he recorded enough of them, he could make them speak again. In 1971, Elridge vanished. His house was boarded up, the basement sealed. Locals whispered that hundreds of tapes were still inside, each one containing a soul. Claire drove to the address listed on the report. The Elridge house stood crooked on a hill, its windows nailed shut, the lawn overgrown. But when she stepped inside, the first thing she heard was the soft whir of a running tape recorder. A single machine sat on a dusty table, its reels turning slowly, though it wasn't plugged in. As she approached, the red light blinked. Then a voice spoke, low, warm, disturbingly familiar. "Claire, you came." Her heart froze. No one could have known she was there. "I heard your voice on the radio last year," the voice said. "You have a beautiful voice. I want to keep it." She bolted for the door, but it slammed shut. Every recorder in the house clicked on at once, red lights flaring like hundreds of tiny eyes. A flood of voices rose around her, whispering, laughing, crying, pleading. And then, just behind her, a man's voice, deep, calm, almost gentle, said, "Don't be afraid. I only want to listen." Then, silence. 3 days later, police found Claire's car outside the Elridge house. Inside, nothing. No signs of struggle, no trace of her. Only the old tape recorder, still running. Her voice looped endlessly, trembling. "Someone, please, turn it off." And right before the reel clicked to an end, another voice, male, quiet, almost loving, whispered, "No. Your voice is too beautiful. I'll keep it forever." Locals say if you pass by the Elridge house after midnight and you stop to listen, really listen, you can hear hundreds of voices in the wind calling your name, waiting for someone new to record. Episode 5. The House That Eats Light. They say darkness is just the absence of light, but in some places, it's alive. When Mark and Julia Henderson bought the old brick house on Cypress Hill, they thought it was a bargain. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, and a view of the valley. It was a little run down, sure, but they were newlyweds, full of plans and optimism. The realtor had said the place was a bit unusual. The previous owners had moved out suddenly, leaving most of their furniture behind. There was no power bill history for the past 6 months. And when Julia asked why, the realtor hesitated before saying, "They said the lights stopped working." On their first night, everything seemed fine. They brought in boxes, ordered takeout, laughed about how creepy the empty halls looked in the dark. But when Mark flipped the light switch in the living room, the bulb flickered once, then dimmed, and dimmed, until the room was swallowed by shadow. He replaced the bulb the next day. New bulb, new socket, still the same thing happened. The light didn't burn out, it was drained, as if something was drinking it. At first they joked about it. Julia said the house had a vitamin D deficiency. But soon it wasn't funny anymore. No matter how many lights they brought in, lamps, candles, flashlights, they all faded. Even the sunlight through the windows seemed duller. By the third week, their plants began to die. By the fifth, Mark's shadow stopped appearing in the mirror. Julia started hearing noises in the dark rooms, soft, rhythmic breaths. Sometimes when she turned suddenly, she'd catch a glimpse of a darker shape standing in the corner, not blocking light, but absorbing it. Mark thought she was just stressed, until one night he woke to find the bedroom lights dimming again, and a black stain spreading across the ceiling like ink in water. When he touched the wall, it was warm, pulsing, almost like skin. They tried moving out, packed their things, called a truck, booked a hotel. But when the movers arrived, the house was dark even in daylight. None of the windows showed the outside anymore, just an endless blackness beyond the glass, as if the world outside had vanished. Julia screamed when her flashlight beam hit the wall and didn't reflect back. The light bent, twisted, and disappeared, as though the darkness had eaten it. "Mark," she whispered, trembling, "it's not the house losing power. It's feeding." That night, Mark left his camera running while they slept, to prove to himself it was all in their heads. He never got to review the footage. When the police entered 2 weeks later, the house was completely dark. No power, no windows, no visible light anywhere. Their car was still in the driveway. Dinner plates were on the table. But no trace of Mark or Julia. Only the camera remained, battery dead, but the screen faintly glowing with residual static. The last few seconds of recovered footage show the bedroom, pitch black. Then, a faint whisper, barely audible. "Julia." "Do you see it?" Mark. "See what?" Julia. "It's watching." A pause, then a sound, like something inhaling, long and deep. The picture fades to black, and in that final second, before the tape ends, a single phrase appears in the static. A voice not theirs. "The dark is full now." The house still stands on Cypress Hill, windows boarded shut. Neighbors say no light has ever escaped from it. Not flashlights, not moonlight, not even dawn. And sometimes, if you drive by late at night and your headlights hit the front door, the light doesn't reflect. It just disappears. Episode 6. The Girl Who Lived in Photographs. They say a photograph captures a moment, but what if that moment never ended? Evan Klein was a quiet kid, photography major, shy, introverted, always behind the camera instead of in front of it. He loved old things, film cameras, expired rolls, and forgotten Polaroids. His favorite hobby was visiting flea markets, hunting for lost photographs that once meant something to someone. One Sunday afternoon, he found a box labeled "Do Not Sell" under a table at a yard sale. Inside were dozens of old Polaroids, all slightly faded, all taken in the same place. A small white farmhouse surrounded by trees. Every photo had a date scrawled on the bottom corner in red ink, all from the same year, 1982. And in every single picture, there was a girl, standing somewhere in the background, always watching the camera, always smiling. At first, Evan thought it was a coincidence. Maybe she was part of the family. But the more he looked, the stranger it got. In one photo, she stood in the field, in the next by the window, then on the porch, then closer. Always the same white dress, the same crooked smile, the same eyes that seemed to know him. When he held the pictures under the light, the ink shimmered faintly, as if still wet. That night he pinned the Polaroids to his wall, arranging them chronologically, trying to piece together the story of the girl and the house. But when he woke up the next morning, one photo was missing. He found it on the floor by his bed. The girl had moved closer again, now standing right at the edge of the frame. And this time, her eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at him. He tore it off the wall, shoving it back in the box. But when he tried to take a picture with his own Polaroid camera later that day, the photo that came out wasn't the room he'd just shot. It was the farmhouse. Same porch, same tree, same girl. Her hand raised in a faint wave. Evan stopped sleeping. He tried burning the photos, but the flames curled away from them, refusing to touch the paper. He tried throwing them out, but they reappeared the next morning, neatly stacked on his desk. And every day the girl grew closer. He called the woman who'd run the yard sale. When he asked about the box, she went silent. Then she said softly, "That box wasn't supposed to leave the house," and hung up. By the end of the week, Evan noticed something else. When he took pictures of himself in mirrors or windows, he wasn't always alone. A pale figure, faint but distinct, stood behind him in every reflection. Same white dress, same crooked smile. He covered the mirrors, stopped taking pictures. But one night, his camera flashed on its own. He woke up to find a new Polaroid sliding out, a picture of him sleeping. And behind him, standing by the bed, the girl. The police found Evan's apartment 3 days later. The front door was locked from the inside. Every wall was covered with Polaroids, hundreds of them, forming a mosaic that filled the entire room. Most showed the same thing. Evan, at different moments, growing thinner, paler, more terrified. In the last photo, he wasn't there. Only the girl remained, standing alone in his apartment, smiling. They never found Evan, but if you look closely at the photos taken by the police, you can see something strange in the background. A faint reflection on the lens of the officer's camera. A girl in a white dress, smiling, still watching. Episode 7. The Sleep Experiment. They said it was just a study. 5 volunteers, 30 days, no sleep, no side effects. At least, that's what they promised. In 1989, deep beneath an abandoned airbase in the Nevada desert, a small group of military scientists began an experiment to study the limits of the human mind. The project's code name was Erebus, after the Greek god of darkness. 5 subjects were selected from military prisons. Their sentence would be wiped clean if they participated. All they had to do was stay awake for 30 days inside a sealed underground chamber, breathing a special gas mixture said to keep the brain alert indefinitely. There were no clocks, no windows, just cameras, intercoms, and the hum of the gas system that filled the air like a low mechanical heartbeat. At first, everything seemed fine. Day 1, they laughed, joked, sang. Day 3, they were restless but talkative. Day 5, their eyes began to hollow, their voices grew sharper. By day 7, the subjects had stopped speaking to each other. They whispered to themselves instead, incoherent fragments about the shadows moving too close. One man stared at the corner for 9 hours straight, muttering something about a door in the dark. When researchers tried to calm him, he screamed until his throat bled. On day 9, the first incident occurred. Subject 3 attacked Subject 1 with a metal cot frame, insisting he was trying to climb out. The others didn't intervene. They only watched. When guards entered to restrain him, the subject begged them not to turn off the lights. He said, "If you do, they'll come out." The gas was adjusted to reduce aggression, but it didn't help. It only made the voices clearer. By day 12, sleep deprivation wasn't the problem anymore. It was what came after. The subjects had stopped eating, stopped responding. Yet their eyes, bloodshot and wide, stayed open, as if something behind them refused to let them close. One night, the surveillance feed flickered. When it returned, all 5 subjects were standing perfectly still in a circle, facing the center of the room. Their mouths moved in unison, but there was no sound. Then, one of them looked directly into the camera and smiled. When the researchers finally entered the chamber on day 15, they found blood smeared on the walls in long, deliberate patterns, not random, but written. Each line repeated the same phrase over and over: "Let us stay awake." 3 subjects were still alive, barely. Their skin was pale, torn at the fingertips, as if they'd been trying to peel something away. When a medic tried to sedate them, one whispered, "You don't understand. Sleep isn't rest. Sleep is the door, and we locked it." They were moved to the medical wing for observation. Cameras recorded everything. None of the surviving subjects blinked for the next 48 hours. At 3:14 a.m., one of them, Subject 2, sat upright and began screaming a single word over and over: "Wake! Wake! Wake!" Seconds later, all power in the facility went out. When the emergency lights came on, every guard was unconscious. Every doctor was gone. The doors to the chamber had been torn open from the inside. Weeks later, when the investigation team arrived, the entire base was empty, except for the control room. Inside, they found the final footage: a grainy tape showing the chamber's floor covered in black dust. Something was written there, carved into the concrete with fingernails: "We never slept. We never will." As the camera panned across the room, a figure appeared briefly, tall, emaciated, faceless, standing where the subjects had once gathered. The screen flickered, the image distorted, and a faint voice whispered through the static, "Do you ever wonder who's awake when you dream?" The Erebus project was erased from all government records, but sometimes in late-night radio chatter near the Nevada desert, technicians report hearing fragments of an old transmission, a voice repeating again and again, in perfect calm, "Stay awake. Stay awake. Stay awake." Episode 8, The Mirror Test. They called it the Mirror Test, a simple psychological study, a harmless experiment. At least, that's how it began. In 2011, a research team at a small university in Colorado launched a project to study self-recognition under sensory isolation. 10 volunteers were placed in identical soundproof rooms, each with one object, a mirror. They were told to sit and look into their own reflection for 10 hours straight, under soft white light. No distractions, no clocks, no talking, just themselves. The researchers wanted to see what would happen when the human mind stared at its own face for too long. By hour 2, subjects reported mild anxiety. By hour 5, some said their faces seemed to move on their own. By hour 7, The test was quietly shut down. Only 5 of the participants left the rooms unassisted. The footage was never released to the public. But according to one intern who leaked the report years later, the video logs captured something no one could explain. Subject 3, a young woman named Nina Clark, stared into her reflection for nearly 8 hours without blinking. When a researcher knocked on the glass, Nina didn't respond. Her reflection, however, did. It turned its head, slowly, to look directly at the camera. Moments later, the lights flickered, and when they came back on, Nina was gone. Her chair was empty, but her reflection remained. The project was shut down immediately. The mirrors were confiscated and sealed in government storage. Every file was marked classified. But 3 years later, one of the researchers, Dr. Alan Voss, was found dead in his apartment. He'd smashed every mirror in the house, except one. A single bathroom mirror remained intact, covered with handprints from the inside. On the wall, he had written in his own blood, "They don't reflect. They remember." And a janitor who discovered the scene later claimed that before the police arrived, he caught a glimpse of something moving inside the mirror. Not a reflection, but a face, watching him, mouthing words he couldn't hear. He quit the next day, never speaking of it again. Over time, other incidents surfaced. A college student claimed she bought a mirror from a thrift store and began seeing herself blinking out of sync. A photographer noticed that in every picture he took, his reflection smiled a split second after he did. And one family in Oregon reported that their bathroom mirror grew colder every night until frost formed on the glass, from the inside out. There's one part of the original mirror test that was never explained. During the 7th hour of observation, audio from all 10 rooms recorded a faint whisper, not from the participants, but from the mirrors themselves. The voice repeated one sentence in perfect unison across all microphones: "We're still here." Today, no university admits to having run the experiment. But if you search government auction listings, you might find a reference to reflective cognitive study equipment, batch number MIR 2011. Every item labeled damaged. And rumor has it, one of the mirrors from the test resurfaced online years later, sold on a collector's forum for less than $50. The buyer never posted again. They say if you stare into a mirror long enough, your reflection starts to move on its own. Most people laugh that off, but next time you look at yourself, just pay attention. If your reflection smiles first, don't smile back. Episode 9, The Signal Room. They say radio waves never die, they just drift endlessly, waiting for someone to listen. In 1978, a small broadcast station outside Flagstaff, Arizona, known as KQRC 103.7, went silent overnight. No warning, no goodbye message. The last thing listeners heard was a faint voice breaking through the static, whispering, "Don't answer the tone." The next morning, when engineers arrived, the entire crew was gone. The on-air light was still glowing red, and from inside the broadcast booth, a single tone was still playing, a low hum, exactly 17.2 hertz, the same frequency used by the military for deep signal testing, the same frequency that makes the human body vibrate. Authorities closed the case after a few weeks. Equipment failure, they said. But rumor spread quickly. Someone had found the emergency tape left in the booth. It wasn't supposed to exist, but late-night archivists and ham radio enthusiasts claimed to have heard it. The tape began with the sound of a normal show. DJ Mark Holloway introducing songs, cracking jokes. Then, somewhere around 2:14 a.m., the static grew louder. Mark's voice faltered. Folks, we're getting something strange on Channel 2. Some kind of signal. Low tone, repeating. Hold on. Then came silence. And beneath that silence, a whispering chorus, faint but distinct. Hundreds of overlapping voices, speaking in perfect rhythm. We found the signal. We found the signal. Every test run on the tape showed no external transmission, no interference, no layering. But when one technician slowed the audio to half speed, a new voice emerged. Deep, mechanical, cold. You're inside it now. The technician quit the next day. He was later found in his garage, every electronic device dismantled, every radio wire cut, as if trying to keep the sound from coming back. Years passed. The building that once housed KQRC was abandoned. But those who live nearby say that on certain nights, usually when storms roll in, you can still pick up the frequency 103.7 FM on an old analog radio. You'll hear faint static, then a low tone, and sometimes a voice. Sometimes it's Mark Holloway, still broadcasting from somewhere. Other times it's the whispering crowd, chanting that same phrase. We found the signal. In 1995, a college student researching paranormal frequencies broke into the station with a handheld recorder. She never came out. Her audio log, however, was found weeks later. It began with her breathing heavily, then a low hum filling the air. At the 3-minute mark, she said, "I can see something moving behind the glass. It looks like waves. No, not waves. Faces. They're in the static. They're watching." The recording ended there. The hum continued for another 7 hours. Experts later analyzed the file and found something terrifying. Within the waveform of the hum, there were patterns. Perfectly symmetrical, structured, almost like a coded language. A retired NASA engineer, after seeing the data, simply said, "This wasn't noise. It was a reply." Today, if you scroll through forgotten corners of shortwave radio forums, you might find users who claim to have tuned in to the signal room, a hidden frequency that plays only between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. It begins with a hum, then static, then the whisper. Some say if you listen long enough, you'll start hearing your own name in the chorus. Others never turn their radios off again, because the signal starts coming from inside the house. There's one final note in the official KQRC archives, dated February 12, 1979. It was handwritten, unsigned, left in the logbook beside the dead transmitter. It reads, "The signal isn't sent. It's received, and once you've heard it, it keeps listening too." Episode 10, The Last Voice. Every story has an ending, but not every voice goes silent. Some keep speaking, even after there's no one left to listen. My name doesn't matter. It never did. I've been telling you these stories, one by one, hoping you'd start to notice. The places, the patterns, the echoes. The camp that burned down in '97, the haunted highway, the girl who vanished into her own reflection, the signal that whispers your name. They weren't just tales, they were records, fragments of something I was never meant to find. A few weeks ago, I got a box in the mail. No return address, just one label, Archive T001. Inside were 10 cassette tapes, each numbered, each labeled with a place I'd already spoken about. But here's the thing, I never sent these tapes to anyone, and I'd never recorded them, at least not that I remember. I played the first tape, It began with my voice, steady and calm, telling the same story you heard in episode 1. But halfway through, something changed. My tone shifted, the background hum grew louder, and a second voice began speaking underneath mine. Faint, rhythmic, repeating my words a split second before I did. It wasn't an echo, it was a lead. I played another tape. Same thing. Each recording had that second voice, guiding, correcting, sometimes whispering new lines I'd never said aloud. And by the 5th tape, it started addressing me directly. "You're not telling their stories," the voice said. "You're remembering ours." I tried to destroy the box, but when I burned the tapes, the fire went silent. No crackling, no smoke, just the sound of breathing. Steady, synchronized, coming from behind me. When I turned around, the lights flickered, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. A reflection of myself in the dark window, speaking before I did, mouthing words I hadn't yet said. I started connecting the dots. Every story, the mirror, the station, the town, the tapes, they all had one thing in common: a signal. Something transmitting through time, memory, and sound. Something that uses voices to travel. Mine, yours, anyone who listens long enough. I think that's why I've been recording. Not to tell you what happened, but to pass it on. There's a theory that certain frequencies don't just carry sound, they carry presence. The 17.2 Hz tone from KQRC, the whisper in the mirror test, the static in the archive tapes. They weren't separate events. They were all part of the same signal, the same entity, reaching through any voice it can find. And I've been its voice all along. I didn't realize it until now, but every time I told one of these stories, it spread a little further. Through the microphones, through the headphones, through you. Because sound never dies. It just finds new ears. I don't know if this will be my last message, but if you're still listening, if you can still hear me, then the signal has already found you. You'll know when it happens. The static in your room will get louder. Your reflection will move out of sync. And when you hear that faint hum in the silence, don't try to find where it's coming from, because it's not coming from anywhere. It's coming for you. This is the Archivist, signing off for the last time. If you're hearing this, you've already joined the broadcast.